Oh my gosh, Kelly, we're back.
We are back almost a year later. Here we are again.
I know. And if it's March 17th, 2022, which happens to be my son's 34th birthday, it's an amazing day. He was actually due on February 29th. So he was 17 days late, and no one would have predicted it was going to land on St. Patrick's Day. It's a great day in our family. But we are here as continuing a conversation we started this time of year when everything shut down. Do you remember that when you think about it?
2 years ago, when the pandemic hit, we thought, well, one way that we're going to cope with it ourselves is kind of talk through some of the things. And, we were all virtual all the time. And we just felt, we weren't out on the road. We weren't out in front of teachers. And we just felt like we wanted to maintain some sort of normalcy. So we did 30 conversations in the spring of 2020.
Yeah, and I just want to show people where they are, because this may be the first time some people have seen them. And if you are on this Padlet, which we'll have a link to, you can see it says padlet.com/pennykittle/conversations with Kelly Gallagher. And they go all the way back, if you come all the way back on here to 2020. And all of these are interviews and conversations with people that we care about. And then they have links down below the conversation of all the things that we talk about, just like we will today. So we record these just as a way to have a conversation with each other and teachers.
And, we were hoping, a year later, pandemic would be behind us, and it's, it's still there. And teachers I think are really, really, really struggling right now in trying to regain some sense of post-pandemic normalcy. And so I'm hoping that, that these conversations, this new round, we're going to do 30 more, some of them with just the two of us and some of them with some of our friends, that this will help, I think, re-energize. I don't know about you, but I had quite a few people, contact me, email me, Twitter, DM me, when are you guys going to start these again? And so here we are.
Yeah, I appreciate that anyone cares what we have to say. But honestly, the reason I love recording these is the conversation with you always sparks new things that I'm thinking about, and helps me kind of clarify, just like writing in our notebooks does, what I believe in and what I want to say. Because like I said to you, if we think about where we are 2 years later, we have so many students who might have complied in the past, but there has been a loss of some of the energy for school, especially with the upper grades that you and I have always taught. And of course, I taught this fall on campus in Mass, and I had 2 of my 40 students who had access to books during the pandemic in their house that they wanted to read. So to a kid, they had not been reading. It didn't matter if someone assigned reading to them, they were not going to read it. And I think that we are seeing the results of that, and teachers are struggling with kids who just don't want to.
Motivating readers has never been harder than it is now. And I think, again, I like that you shared a tweet earlier this week. I don't know if you want to pull that up or not.
Oh, I'm just going to read it because I've got it up. It's from a 1985 interview. And Paula Frere said, "It seems that the kind of reader and writer we want young children to be, we have to be. We have to know it and teach it by living it."
And I think, and this is not a criticism, I think in the struggle to teach really reluctant readers, I think, and all of the challenges that I've been coaching in Anaheim, the challenges that the teachers are facing, they have been in survival mode. They have been in, trying to keep their head above the water. And I think as a result of that, and again, this is not a criticism, but I think a lot of teachers have lost contact with their reading lives. And so I thought maybe today we'd start with teachers, talk with adults, and talk about, we haven't, done this in almost a year. So I thought maybe we would just share some of the things that we've been reading that we've really liked, and hopefully this might spark a renewal in some teachers who because of the challenges they face, have disconnected from reading themselves.
Yeah, I think that adults are facing the same temptations as our children, students are, in that you pick up your phone and there are so many ways to engage on your phone and so many ways to kind of get lost in a thread. Now, I'm not on TikTok, but I have students, of course, who are. They often send me TikTok videos that they think are funny or interesting. And I will go on and watch one, which is one of my things I like about TikTok, is you don't have to sign up to go view things. And I viewed one 2 nights ago that is a high school English teacher. And I was kind of interested in like, oh, what's this space about? And went into her profile and looked at some of her videos and was kind of surprised at the enormous number of likes when they're pretty much complaining videos. And I was just curious about that. It's one of those things that I thought, there's always some satisfaction in going, yep, that's how I feel, right? But it also made me think that there's a lot that you can get lost in a thread on TikTok and then go to the next and the next and the next. And all of a sudden you don't have time to read, or you crash.
So you and I have been in a personal book club with three of our friends. And I thought maybe, since we haven't had this conversation in many months, we might just start by, we start by sharing, what we have read. And here we are. Here's a visual of what we've read in the last, I think when we left off last time, we'd actually talked about maybe Homeland Elegies and Hamnet, but this is what we have read since then. So, and we haven't practiced this conversation.
Yeah.
When you look at that list, or when you look at those books that we've read, what pops out?
So for me, the interesting thing is that we chose books that either, like, we would rotate who got to choose. And I always like that because there are several books on here I had never heard of that, because someone else chose them, I read. And I have definite books that I could barely get through. I loved them so much, I was afraid to turn the pages. Hamnet is one, because something that I love, the ability to transform me into a place and time that I'm already curious about, in this case, the life of William Shakespeare. So that one was a huge hit. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue changed the way I thought about death and reincarnation, as did The Midnight Library. So there was a theme there that I didn't realize I was also kind of thinking about, and have both of those books in the space of what happens when you die. To me was really interesting too.
Yeah, and I loved, I love many of the books here, but I think the one that really jumped out for me was Cloud Cuckoo Land, in which Anthony Dewar, who wrote All the Light You Cannot See, writes 3 different stories that weave together, even though one of the stories is 700 years ago, one is fairly contemporary, and one is futuristic. I just thought, from a craft point of view, how crazy talented you have to be to do that. And then we were so dazzled by that book, and then we found out it was a finalist for the National Book Award, but it didn't win. Hell of a Book won. And so we said, wow, we have to read the book that was chosen ahead of Cloud Cuckoo Land. And I mean, it's cliche that hell of a book was a hell of a book. And I think there's certain books that okay, like and I'm just saying this off the top of my head, certain books that were interesting, like you said, like Midnight Library, but I didn't find the level of craft that we found in a book like Hell of a Book, the writing craft, or even in Bewilderment, the craft of that. I don't know. It was just, to me, it was a little bit elevated. If you don't know the book Bewilderment, about a father who has a special needs child and is widowed. And I mean, to try to say it in a sentence or two, what it's really about, doesn't do it justice, but the actual level of writing in that book was really incredible.
Right. And I think that the interesting piece for me is, for example, Lonesome Dove, which to me always looks like an outlier here. So we read Pulitzer Prize winning books. We sometimes look for prize winning books, I think, just because we're fascinated by what wins. And this one, of course, won so many years ago, but it was a book that my dad handed me at one point and said, "You always are talking about books you love. This is my favorite book." And I want to say it was less than 2 years later that he died, because I put it on my nightstand and it was sitting next to my bed for 5 or 6 years, and I would never pick it up and read it. It was almost like that last little thing that I knew would connect me to what mattered to him. And so in the book club, when it was my turn to choose, and I said, I would love, I've got to read this book at some point. I think I'm ready. And I was so grateful that all of you were willing to read it, because it was such a departure from what we typically read. So that's another great thing I love about a book club.
It was always on my radar screen because I love Westerns, and I'd never read it. I think maybe I was daunted by the 800 and something pages of it. But it was 800 pages later, and I was really sorry when it was done. Where on the other hand, I've read 100-page books that I couldn't wait to get through, So it was, and the craft of writing in that book was unbelievable as well.
Well, and I was thinking of Homeland Elegies, which is one that you chose. And I remember how enthusiastic you were. You sent us all of these like interviews and things that you'd found that he had done, because it felt like there was so much to talk about with that book. It's just such an incredible, it's this magnificent weaving of so many things about life and his journey. It was just truly like, I felt half the time like I was hanging on as he was racing forward. There was a lot to process. And I think in the end, when I look at this collection over just a little over last year that we read with other people, I'm going to come out of this just so we can continue our conversation. But the thing that I've noticed the most, and in particular with you, is that you and I read differently. Have you noticed that? I mean, do you think about that? We often see books very differently.
I noticed it in our most recent conversation about bewilderment.
Yeah.
Plot, for one example, plot to me is way more important to me than it is to you. I found that fascinating.
I know. And what I thought was interesting is when I said, but I don't care about the plot. And Donna goes, you always say that. And I went, I do. So that was a moment where I thought, there are books that I care very much about the plot because I'm not invested in the characters or in the writing. And all I want is an easy read. I want something that will put me to sleep. It's often what I read on a plane or at night. And then there are books that I want to sit back and go, how in the world did this writer do this? Cloud Cuckoo Land. How could he have kept not only the 3 central stories, but the manuscript that's at the beginning of all those parts that is found? How did he keep all of that? And I watched interviews with him and stuff, and I still don't get it. Like, how did he do it? Because it's beautiful and amazing.
I don't know. I have to have, if the plot doesn't work for me or the plot has holes in it, I don't know. I don't care how beautiful the writing is. It becomes problematic for me.
Yeah, I could hear that. It's so interesting too, because you mentioned that at the start of Bewilderment, you were impatient for it to begin. And I was not at all. I was lost in, he's presenting this. It's like he's given me like eyeglasses to watch his life, and he's presenting it in such a compelling way that I don't care where it's going. I'm just, you know what I mean? And that is such a difference. Mm-hmm. But if you think of a classroom, there are lots of Pennies and Kellys and others that read very differently. And it goes back again to why do teachers read? Because we're talking only about personal reading that we're interested in. We're not talking about getting better as teachers, professional development books, or reading young adult fiction so that we can entice our kids to read those books or have more things to say about them. We're talking today just about our own personal reading. Why does it matter?
So maybe we could share a little bit, because that's what we read in book clubs, but I know that you've read, I know that each of us has read outside of book clubs.
Yeah.
So maybe you could share a title or two or three of something that you've read that we did not do in our book club.
Yeah. So the first one I think of is The Great Believers, and it's a National Book Award finalist years ago. And the reason that I decided to read it, I purchased this years ago and started it, and it was a little triggering for me. I was in high school. This is about the AIDS crisis in Chicago. And when I was in high school, two young men that I hung out with all the time, one died of AIDS in the 90s. And the minute I started reading it, and it launched me back to the mid 80s and the 70s and 80s, it was too close. And I remember closing it. And then Cam, my son, and his wife both read this and asked me if I had read it and how invested they were in Yale, the central character. And it actually takes place over two time periods, in the midst of the crisis that Yale is in. And then 30 years later, the sister of his best friend is searching for her daughter in Paris. So you have two different places, two different time periods. And it is just beautifully constructed and so engaging. And this time through, I just found that it was in some way healing to read it. So highly recommend it. But I think, like with all books, we come into them with kind of different purposes, because two of the others, I tend to read a ton, as you know. And so over last year, I read 121 books. And two of the other ones that I read are essay collections, The Reckonings, and what's the other one? No, I can't think of it. It's on my Kindle. But Leslie Jameson wrote the other one. And then this is, I can't think of her name, but they're two people who write just about life. And it's luminous, incredibly developed writing. They're like the best essayists I know. And, when we started writing about essays for Essential Studies, I was reading collections of essays again and again and again, because I was trying to get my hands around what is an essay. And that essays padlet that we created is full of examples of good essays. Like I put one on this morning, I don't know if you saw it, about We're All Talking About Bruno Now. And it's an analysis of why that particular Disney song has risen to the level of Let It Go, but has a very different feel to it. And so I love that kind of stuff, the exploration in an essay. But I also was struck, I know this is a diversion from where we were going, but that when Kylene read For Essential Studies, she was, to say it politely, surprised that we called that poem an essay, that we call Andrea Gibson's incredible America Reloading an essay, right? And I remember saying to her, well, it is making a claim and using lots of evidence to back it up. It is certainly what we would consider an argument, so you can call it an argument poem, but it has essay moves to it. And I think that's something else we've been thinking about, is how forms change over time.
Yeah.
What have you been reading?
You can't remember the names, but we'll put them in the Padlet. So
absolutely. I know it's Leslie Jameson, and it's Make It Scream, Make It Burn, or Make It Burn, Make It Scream. Anyway.
So here's a couple of things I've been reading lately. One is a book called In Order to Live.
Oh, did you read that because I told you to?
I don't remember, possibly.
Because I had the whole ninth grade at my high school's reading it.
Oh my gosh. And it's about it's nonfiction. And I noticed, when we showed the books that we've read in our personal book club, that only two of those were nonfiction.
Yeah.
The rest were all fiction. But this is a true story of a young woman's escape from North Korea, a harrowing escape that involves human trafficking and all kinds of horrors. And you know, it has, obviously she's on the cover, it has a happy ending, but it gives it's very Orwellian look at North Korea. So anybody who's teaching Animal Farm or 1984, I think that would be a really good extended read in order to live. I gotta say though, if we're really talking about helping teachers rediscover reading lives, that maybe sometimes, you know, it's something lighter and something easier to read. As you know, I've always loved crime fiction. And so I just read Michael Connelly's The Dark Hours, which blends two characters that have normally been in separate books. So for years, he's had this character, Harry Bosch, who's now retiring. And then there's this a young detective. Her name is Renee Ballard. And so this is the first book where they both sort of intersect and help one another. And it's just a beach read, some end of the day read when you're exhausted and you can't think, you don't want to think too hard. And then I think I mentioned this in one of the webinars that we did, but I'm still reading A Story a Night of David Sedaris, The Best of Me. I read a piece last night where it's hilarious, where he's on an airplane and he's sucking a lozenge and he coughs and it spits out and lands on the sleeping woman next to him. And just this whole essay of, okay, here are the three options of how I could handle this had me crying. I was laughing so hard. So I think in a time of real trouble, somebody like David Sedaris, if you've never read his work, is just a humorist who I think is really, really fun to read as well.
Yeah, that's a nice little aside there, that sometimes we need the relief that books bring. You know, I've been obsessed with the news on the Ukraine and my friend's family who's there, and it's like hard for me to pull away, and I do a lot of reading about it as well. So then to be able to just step away and read something that's lighter.
Some escapism is definitely.
And don't you feel like teachers need that right now?
Yes.
I know that what we need is a essay that makes us laugh or just inspires us to remember why we want to be teachers and why we want to think about language with kids.
So we should add that as we're beginning this next round of 30, that because of our respective schedules, they will not be 30 consecutive days or 30 straight Monday through Fridays. There may be gaps here and there between them as we have commitments to do other things, but we will be back tomorrow. And tomorrow we will be with one of our favorite people, Carol Jago, longtime veteran English teacher, author of many professional development books, and former president of NCTE. And so we're very much looking forward to catching up with our good friend Carol tomorrow.
Well, and talking specifically about what NCTE is doing about censorship and the moves that are happening in this country that are just so intimidating for most of our colleagues.
Right.
So
as the teachers don't have enough to worry about now, there's the censorship issue. So we're gonna get into that tomorrow. And so Absolutely. Welcome back to our 30, and pass the word that we've started again, and we hope to see you on this journey again.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.